So much. And I couldn't agree more with Michael Link. So, well, today I'm speaking about smartphone participation. It's nothing close to LLMs or generative AI. But before I start, I would like to give credit to my PhD student. It's his research I'm presenting today, and he was willing to let me do that. So thanks to Joshua Klaassen and of course my other colleagues from the University of Mannheim and Geses Leibniz Institute in Mannheim. So let's start. So we all know, and this was also during the last 2 days, yesterday and today, we talked a lot about web surveys. And web surveys are at the forefront. So it's growing, and we have some indications that it will be one of them, or it's already one of the most important survey modes we use actually on a daily basis. But when looking more closely at web surveys, there's one question. So how do people participate in web surveys? And they can use different devices. For instance, they can use a smartphone, and that's what it's today about. But certainly in the future, they may also use their smartwatch, or they may already use it in some ways. And this is important to know who is using what device, what's the stability of using the specific device for web survey completion. And this is especially important when it comes to smartphones, because they're equipped with so many sensors, like the GPS sensor, the accelerometer sensor, where we can draw conclusions about activity, or the microphone the built in. We could ask for an open narrative question through speech. All this works. Smartphones include a couple of apps, so we could link our web surveys to web tracking, for instance, browser tracking. So there's a bunch of new data, digital data we can collect alongside web surveys when participants use their smartphone. However, the point is, so we really need to know what's the share of the respondents and how do they look like? So what is their characteristic? And this is what I do today. So there is some research already looking into that, but still we lack quite some evidence, especially when it comes to probability-based panels. So we know that we know somehow that the smartphone, all of you, would you agree with me that smartphone participation in web surveys is increasing? I think so, yes. But the point is, so to what extent? And we lack information about that. And it's not just that we have short periods of time where we track smartphone participation, but we also don't know much about the stability. We don't know much about countries. And that's the reason why I'm so thankful today that I can present data from the Cross-National Online Survey 2. Yesterday, my colleagues from Hungary just talked about it, because the information is out there. And this is what we do at the moment, or now, looking at 12 different countries across Europe, having data from 2021 to 2023. So let's check our research question. Overall, we have 3 research questions we investigate. So the first one is on the prevalence of smartphone participation in online panels. The second one looks at the drivers, at the factors of smartphone participation. And the last one looks at the stability of smartphone participation. As I said, we used Kronos 2 data. It's part of the European Social Survey. It's a large-scale panel survey that was conducted in 12 countries. This time, in the first Kronos, we just had 3 countries. Now we could get much more countries in, and the collection of the data was between October 21 and October 23. So we have quite new data. We have about 8,000, a bit more than 8,000 respondents across these 12 countries. And most importantly, there was no restrictions when it comes to the device respondents could use for participating in the Kronos waves. Let's take a look at the Kronos waves. So it's not as consistent as you would have expected it. So what we can see, overall, it was scheduled to have 7 waves, 1 welcome wave and 6 follow-up waves. But we have some countries, they started a bit earlier. We have some countries that start a bit later. Then we have some countries, they started early, ended quite early again, like Hungary, for instance, they just conducted 3 waves, the welcome wave, the first wave and the second wave. Then we have some other countries like Belgium, they started quite early, used some waves. So it's not like as consistent as you would expect it to be. Let's take a look at the analytical strategy we follow today. So in the first step to address our first research question, we simply compare the smartphone rate across countries or between countries. And in the next step, so in order to determine the drivers of smartphone participation, we're running a mixed effects logistic regression, and we have different levels. We have the survey level, the respondent level, and the country level. And finally, when it comes to our third research question, we then compare the stability of smartphone participation across the countries. So we look at respondents that always use the smartphone across all waves that were done or conducted, at least in one and in none. So let's take a look at the results for our first research question. Here we can see there is some variation. We have some countries, they are almost by 60% on average smartphone participation across waves, for instance, Slovenia, but also Portugal and Italy. On the other hand side, we have countries like the Czech Republic, in which smartphone participation is quite low, below 40%. But overall, what we can see is in 8 out of 12 countries, smartphones are already the predominant data or participation device. Let's take a look at our research question 2. Now we look at the table for our fixed effects regression. And what we can see most importantly, smartphone participation is increasing over the waves. So it's getting higher. What we also can see is that especially female respondents decide to participate through a smartphone. In contrast, young respondents young respondents, I have to look over there, sorry, bad eyes. So we can also see age has a negative effect, so it's on smartphone participation. The same applies to higher education, daily internet use in hours, and there's like the digital knowledge variable in the Chronos, which also indicates that it has a decreasing effect. I come to that later, so it might sound weird that people that have a higher digital knowledge are less willing to or less likely to participate through a smartphone. So now when looking at the stability, we can see there's also, again, quite some variation. So for instance, we have Hungary now, so where we can see that about 40% always use a smartphone. They don't change the device at all. On the other side, we can see now in the Czech Republic, less than 20% are stable in using the same device. They change. And we can also see on the upper part of the figure that we also have some variation here, seeing that some people always use the same device, but not the smartphone. So they stick to a device that is not a smartphone at all. So it's a tablet or it's a PC. They don't use a smartphone at all. And this is most pronounced for Hungary and also for Belgium. However, there are also some countries in between, like Portugal and Italy. Portugal and Slovenia, sorry, where people just, the share of people not using a smartphone at all across waves is quite low. So the conclusion here is all the countries, they're quite different in how they can attract respondents and how these respondents participate in the online panel at the end. Here we can also see the 3 groups we came up with: always smartphone, sometimes smartphone, or never using a smartphone. And here we can see that there are some differences, especially when it comes to age, but also when it comes to gender. So again, female respondents are more likely or overrepresented over here in that group using a smartphone always, all the time. Again, we also can see some differences for high educated respondents, whereas, for instance, daily internet use and the digital knowledge of the respondents does not kick in like the other respondent characteristics here. But overall, the groups are somehow different. Let's conclude. Again, smartphone participation it varies across Europe. So it's not like we're not just one whole bucket where we can put all in, but because they did the same. Now we have country-specific differences. And we should take them into consideration because they allow us to do stuff or not to do stuff. When it comes to digital data collection, like app usage and sensor data collection. Smartphone participation is mainly driven by age, gender, and education. So young people and females and less educated respondents are less likely to use a smartphone. There are also some differences when it comes to tech savviness and internet usage. And some respondents, as you could see, will never participate through a smartphone. So for these respondents, we cannot collect any additional data alongside the web survey. Yeah, so I'm running out of time. Thank you so much. The take-home message is, so the majority takes smartphones, and it's increasing, but we're still not there. And some respondent group are overrepresented. Thank you so much. Sorry.